I am here in Gunnison, Colorado. It's the home of the Ute Mountain Ute, and actually our ranch sits on a pre-Ute people's flint knapping site. So we have some really amazing historic uses of our ranch, and we do really try to acknowledge the ancestral uses and learn from the practices of those who came before us. I'm MJ Pickett. I'll share my screen momentarily. And I'm with the Colorado Regenerative Network. We're the Colorado Savory Hub, serving the entire state of Colorado and reaching into some of our neighboring states for support. And then maybe Wyatt, you can introduce yourself. We'll get a feel for who else is on the call, and then we'll jump into our slideshow.
Sure. I'm Wyatt Ball. I'm with Land to Market, which is, I'll explain more in depth later in this presentation, but essentially we're an organization which is focusing on accelerating market adoption of regenerative outcomes on land through market acceleration, essentially. I'm currently in New York City, which I believe is the Lenape people's home. But I usually live in Boulder, Colorado. That's where I'm usually located, which is has multiple original indigenous tribes or people who live there, Arapaho and the Ute as well. So as well as others, Cheyenne, et cetera. So it's good to be here. Looking forward to being here and answering any questions I can. Yeah, and just happy to be here. Cheers.
Great. Before we get started, we just would like to know who's in the room. You know, are you a producer? If you're a new producer with over 10 years of experience, a consumer, activist, or just interested in knowing who's joining us virtually so that we can best cater our presentation to those who are here. So if you don't mind sharing in the chat, that would be great. Producer and advocate, thank you.
So I'm Richard King in California. I have a small ranch and I've been a holistic management educator for a long time and practicing it on my own property.
Great, thank you. Thanks for joining. Advocates, awesome. All right, well, we'll just jump in here. Just give me a moment as I situate. Right, like I mentioned, I'm MJ and we have Wyatt here joining us from Land to Market. We'll share a little bit more about who we are, but then we're gonna dive right into Land to Market, what it is. Wyatt's here to provide the expertise there. And then we'll talk a little bit about how this could potentially support you as a producer or advocates, how you could share this with folks you're working with. So, like I said, I'm MJ. I'm with the Colorado Regenerative Network. I'm the co-hub leader for the Colorado Savory Hub. And what we really do, we exist to facilitate the expansion of regenerative principles. And we really want to just activate the continued support of those producers, particularly in Colorado. There's hubs around the world, but we focus on the Colorado region for more large-scale adoption of these practices across our land base, with the end goal of really enhancing lives, livelihoods, and landscapes of our Colorado region. So we provide a lot of training, coaching, monitoring, peer support, and starting to help folks get access to programs like Land to Market, which Wyatt will share.
Sorry, I muted myself. I knew I was going to do that. Yeah, great to talk about Land to Market. For anyone who doesn't know, Land to Market is a public benefit corporation, which is actually owned by the Savory Institute. And the whole point of Land to Market is to help differentiate products in the marketplace, which are coming from positively trending land, which is under this EOV monitoring protocol that the hubs like MJ's would perform for producer bases. And so essentially what we do as an organization is this verification process for raw materials coming from the land and acting or doing our best to be a voice for land and not products specifically. So we work both with producers in terms of helping get this product to market from a differentiation perspective, but we also work with brands who might be searching for specific products coming from these regenerative land bases, so that they can actually make these market claims, whether it's a direct-to-consumer farmer brand or whether it's a large brand buying a value-added product like a hide, for example, which normally can be just disposed of as a cost to a producer. And so it's it's fine. You can go to the next one. It's all right. It's pretty much, this verification side, this labeling side, the certification side is definitely a major aspect of the program. But beyond that, we also help to build actual regenerative supply chains. And we like to really imagine ourselves more as a regenerative sourcing solution for the marketplace, because a lot of times, especially from a brand perspective, they're looking for material, and we have brands saying there's no supply, and then we have producers saying, well, nobody wants to buy or pay for my product, which I'm making in a regenerative manner. And we see both to be almost the same side of the coin, because we know that there's people out there producing in these ways, and we know that there's people out there who want to be buying these products. And it's about ensuring that this supply chain is not only built, but also is resilient and provides value to everyone in the chain. And Land to Market really embraces this farmer first mentality, where what we're not trying to design a program which is extracting all the value from farmers and providing only value to brands or further down the supply chain. That's not at all the intention. We don't own, sell, take material. We don't claim it to be our own impact or anything of the sort. Really, what we want to do is we want to act as that voice for the land that producers are managing, and ensure that when that product does hit the market, there is not just a label, but an actual acknowledgement from the marketplace that these raw materials are coming from this healthy land. And so we're not practice-based. Of course, we fully believe in holistic management. It's an essential part of the mentality, but EOV, this ecological outcome verification protocol, which is essentially a yearly monitoring protocol, which has both short and long-term monitoring sites and relative different in-depth monitoring aspects, is essential. We need to see the outcomes from that monitoring in order to say that this land is regeneratively trending. And what that means is we're not trying to make claims that don't have any sort of scientific proof or verify raw material in the marketplace that is just simply checking boxes and saying, yes, I do this, but we're not actually seeing the results on the land. You can go to the next one. And so this right here is just kind of an overview of kind of everything I've said, where we're looking to further regenerative agriculture by encouraging the measurement of land health on land bases and bringing the raw materials coming from those products into the marketplace. And so you keep hearing me probably say raw materials instead of, packaged steak or whatever it might be, trim, etc. When we communicate to the market, whether brands, again, if you think of this supply chain, it can be anything from an individual producer to a producer group to a direct consumer farm brand to a supply chain partner, tannery, slaughterhouse, abattoir, etc., or a large brand buying these materials. When we put that seal or that verification process on a packaged good, the point of that, and it's really important for us to nail this down, is that we're not saying we're not approaching this LCA mentality with this specific product. We're trying to communicate to the consumer, but also anybody else involved in that product, that it's the land which is regenerating. It's essential that the land is the focus and the highlight. And so, excuse me, there at the bottom, you can see we have over 1,000 products verified in the marketplace. We have over 70 brands we work with, and that 2.5 million acres actually just hit about 3 million. So We've monitored quite a lot of land. When I say we, the Savory Network, so Land to Market doesn't actually engage in any of this monitoring work for sake of quality assurance and having this third-party verification and removal. But we do have, we verify that we see that this EOV data is trending positively before we put the seal of approval, if you like. Next slide, please. And so this is kind of just an easy to, or maybe not easy, but hopefully easy to follow diagram here on the right, where we essentially have this consumer demand for regenerative products. Then we have the actual land regeneration, which producers, like I'm imagining some here on the call, are engaging in and regenerating land and are monitoring that land, seeing that those positive outcomes and positive trends, and then Land to Market comes in and verifies those trends and communicates it to the marketplace for the benefit of both the producer and the brand using that product. And so what a lot of times in these conversations we get pigeonholed into this, like, well, is there a specific price premium? Can I get X amount % per pound or per whatever might be the product? And of course, price is essential, and we want our producers to be, not our producers, we want producers in our network and in our supply chain, if you like, to be rewarded for the good work they do. But as I mentioned early on in the presentation, a big part of what we do is also build new supply chains for value-added products. So for example, a producer group in our network recently just released a boot with UGG, which was all shearling and sheepskin sourced from verified positively trending land bases in New Zealand. And they just released this new UGG boot, which was using only verified leather, which otherwise would have been a waste product or a non-premium leather product for this producer group. So it's not just about raising the value monetarily for a specific cut or piece of red meat and or any animal. It's really about trying to build whole animal utilization supply chain, bring value to products that potentially might not be valued in the marketplace right now, and try to use that, true value added mentality and whole animal utility throughout an entire supply chain. So here's some leather that was cool. This is kind of, you could see this on our website. It's just a variety of different brands that we work with, anything from single, producers to very large producer groups, to greater large brands, both, here in the US, globally. We really try to embody a global mentality. I like to say, more for myself, but also for Land to Market, it's the reason why I joined the team is, we have a global mind and a local heart. It's understanding that everything in this regenerative movement starts at a local level, even if it is a global supply chain. And a lot of times when we zoom too far out, we ignore the locality and the reality of ecoregions being different, biodiversity being different, how water moves on land. I mean, a lot of times these extremely important factors to land health can get dropped out of the picture due to global mentality. And everything we try to encompass starts in that context building that holistic management preaches and really focuses on understanding how local contexts impact the dealings of both business, but also supply chain building and producer health in all senses of the word. This is just an example of some of the products. So that's our seal up there on the left, and it's on some of these packages. We have Union Snacks there, Serenity Kids, Epic Bars, Pasture Bird, Alexander Farms, the Do Good Dog through Applegate. So a variety of different products with a lot more out there in the marketplace and always building. So I like to just kind of focus on or end on this slide is it really is about the land. I know sometimes maybe I'm being a little repetitive with this statement or this messaging, but I really do think, as a former producer myself, it's essential that when we communicate to the market, we really focus on this land health idea. And when we look into this EOV monitoring protocol, which is more of MJ's field, we're trying to understand what are these trends in soil health, biodiversity, water, carbon cycling, mineral cycling, all these different aspects. And part of this whole journey for land to market, beyond just communicating to the marketplace the value, is also educating the consumer and everybody along that supply chain the true importance of regeneration. So when we work with a large brand who might have seen a cool article somewhere and, oh, we want to get into regenerative whatever, and they come in and don't know the difference between a heifer and a cow and a steer, and you got this whole like vocabulary mismatch. We also focus on this education for brands as well, to understand what it means to have a regenerative mindset, right? I don't like to claim that I am the dictionary of what regenerative means, but I think we all have a grounding in what it means to, and actually at the beginning of this presentation, when Sarah was kind of mentioning that it's all about learning and co-creating and being together in this process, and understanding that it's a continually educating experience, and that it's not just something we snap our fingers, flip a light, and tomorrow we're regenerative. That's not how life works. In our program, for the verification process to happen, there has to be at least 2 years of data from a monitoring perspective. So in that monitoring timeline, you have your baseline year, which consists of a pretty in-depth monitoring plan, and then your second year, which would be the short-term monitoring. And that's the starting point. So we try to have integrity with everything we say from brand to producer level, and that's being grounded in the land. I believe that's the last slide. I can't.
Yeah, we have some, discussion prompts, but I wanted to see if there were questions before we jumped into that. So feel free to put in the chat or unmute yourself if you have any particular questions about all that Wyatt just shared.
And so maybe just a little bit of a prompt, because I think there are some producers in this group, is, if you're hearing everything I'm saying, you're like, well, I only, or not only, but I finish, 12 or 18 head a year. I'm looking, I sell my meat direct, in halves and quarters, or even in a meat box or something of the sort. That's why I mentioned that value add piece, because we understand that sometimes on the singular producer level, they might not need, like, the ultimate goal is to know your farmer. This is at least my opinion. I mean, know your farmer, know your rancher, know where you buy your food, right? And so a lot of quality producers already have those really cemented and strong relationships with their market, and don't, like, land to market seal on a home package essentially isn't going to increase the value to their consumers. But what we can do beyond that is this additional supply chain work, where we might be able to help you or help a producer find added value, whether it's fifth quarter products, organ meats, bones, pet food, hides, etc. We help build those kind of boutique supply chains, if you like, where there might be a brand out there who's looking exactly for that current waste product or aggregated supply of regenerative beef, even trim, etc. So I don't know if that applies to anyone in this room, but sometimes I think that can be a useful indicator of the other way we work beyond just the verification.
Maybe we'll just go to some of these discussion, the challenges we're seeing as a hub, working with some producers. And I think, Wyatt, you've done a great job of just sharing how land to market is growing some of these things, some of these spaces. But to be completely transparent, that this is, it's a newer market, newer project. And so we feel like it's in this early adopter phase, which I think can be really beneficial. But it's this co-creation that we're seeing with producers and with land to market and all of the savory hubs. I think, as producers, we're looking more to land to market to help grow and open those market opportunities, especially as we look at the scale of some of the producers we work with, particularly. They're only killing 12 beef a year, or they're just continual kill. And so that scale piece has been a little bit harder to dive into, especially working with some of these bigger brands. But it's been cool to see land to market help find little niche, or we can call them boutique markets, and for those, hides or whatnot. One other thing is that, just looking at the demand for this supply, there's a lot of regenerative practitioners out there. And what we're hoping is that as we grow our supply and educate our consumers more, that demand shifts. And I think we're starting to see that, especially as more bigger name brands are putting this seal, and people are like, what is that? So it's a cool educational opportunity. But what I think we love most about this is that it's helping match the ethos and values as producers with our market. And that's not something we've seen done before. So something really exciting.
Yeah, we're definitely in that early adopter phase without a doubt. And I think it's a really beautiful spot to be in. It's kind of like that idea of initial disturbance when you're changing from, let's say, a more conventional land management approach to a holistically managed, you have to disturb the market, disturb the land, you have to bring disturbance. And what we're saying is that receptiveness to disturbance in the market is pretty high. And it's pretty exciting how many people want to make change. It's just helping brands understand what change entails, because what we don't want to do is act within the same paradigm to push a different, solution, if you like, that is still pushing within the same paradigm. So it is this early adopter phase without a doubt. And, this, there will probably be continuous mismatch of supply and demand for a few years as we settle out on a both local, regional, and global supply mentality. But that supply chain piece is so key to highlighting where and how and to what degree producers are managing land in a positive way, and how that can be communicated.
Yeah,
I think those are great challenges to identify.
We could have some discussion here, but I think what I want to do is share a little bit more about how producers can engage with this. So you had mentioned land or ecological outcome verification, or EOV, which is, how the hubs, right? Colorado hub, OCRN, or if you're in a different area, you may have a different hub working on this, but the hubs are the folks doing the monitoring. And so this EOV protocol, Wyatt hit on it earlier, but it's really about verifying the land, not certifying, right? It's the first verification of its kind, verifying that the land is progressing. And so it helps with informed land management, right? Like any other monitoring system you do. It helps keep a common language. There's producers all over the world using this same process. Obviously context specific, but it gives us a common language to learn from those around the globe. There's potential for that market differentiation, which we talked about, but then access to environmental service markets, which I think is a pretty cool opportunity, and really just scientifically demonstrates the benefits of livestock on the land in a regenerative manner. I keep doing that. But yeah, EOV, ecological outcome verification, is a both long and short-term monitoring protocol. So we do a baseline, and every 5 years we do a long-term study. And then the years in between, we have some short-term monitoring. It's not nearly as in-depth, but meant to give you some more leading indicators, right? Those decision management pieces. And then the long-term monitoring sites really help to solidify that the land is moving forward. And what's cool about it, I think personally, is it's region or ecoregion specific. So your, ranch in Gunnison, Colorado is not being compared to a ranch on the Front Range or in New York or some non-brittle environment, right? So it's really ecoregion specific and context specific. So, we're looking at what's going on with the soil carbon, what's going on with biodiversity and water, and then all of those, those lower, deeper dive tiers. But yeah, that's Colorado Regenerative Network can help provide those services, both short and long-term monitoring, and connect you with a network of producers who are doing what you're doing, right? And regenerating the land. And then, you're not only learning from peers, but then accessing markets like Land to Market. So I think this is a good time for some discussion and asking questions. I'll take down our slide, our share screen, so we can see other faces if there's questions or anything like that. I see some chats coming in. So yeah, I'd love to answer any questions for you all that we can help. If we have existing long-term trend sites, can we potentially tie those into this verification? Are you talking just long-term monitoring sites? Is that what you're referencing?
Yes, so it depends on the level of data input. Not to say, I don't want to say no immediately. It's just, it's difficult without understanding the full data set. But, well, it leads into the question that Sarah asked as well regarding the cost of EOV. From a land and market perspective, that's actually the hub discussion that's between you and the person performing the monitoring. So I'll let MJ talk about that. But from a data perspective, there is a way, if the data is in depth enough to match our current protocols, then there is a potential for, let's say, like a matching of data, but we haven't actually seen very many, if at all, previous monitoring protocols on producer groups or producers' land bases that have matched the rigor and diversity of EOV's protocol.
Yeah,
and I'll share the chapter 1 of the EOV. It's a public file. I'll put it in the chat right now. You guys can see.
Cool, thanks, Wyatt. Yeah, we haven't seen any protocols that match, like Wyatt said, the rigor. It's a pretty rigorous baseline. But if you have specific questions, you can definitely reach out to our coordinator. I can put her. Actually, Lily, will you put yours in there, your email, to connect you and see if we can figure out for your specific monitoring protocol. But yeah, the costs, they kind of range, right? They're completely dependent on the size of your property. So smaller properties, we're seeing smaller, about 100 acres, we're seeing costs for implementing a baseline at about, what did we say? It was between 12,000 or 1,200, sorry, and $3,000. That would be incredible.
Please don't say that.
1,200 and 3,000 to pay for that baseline, and that includes, your soil carbon tests, all that, and then, it just, depending on the size of your property, your operation, can go up from that, depending on how many long-term sites you would have. So, and that cost is helped spread out over a few years. We try to, not make it all upfront, but we do have to pay, right, a living wage to our monitors and all of that. So the cost can vary, and it's really just dependent on the size of your property. Yes, so your property would be verified all at the same time, unless, we do work with some producers who have several leases. So they're only, looking at specific ranches or, properties, pastures. But right now they're also only selling direct to consumer. So it kind of depends on your situation. And again, the size, it's so context specific. But if you want to reach out to Lily, she just put her email in the chat. It's landmanager@coldharborinstitute.org. She can help connect you with some of the resources to really suss out specifics.
And we'll also both, or I don't know, Lily, if you will be, but I know MJ and I would definitely be at the Regenerate conference. And so, I mean, we'll be exhibiting, MJ will be exhibiting, so we can also have as in-depth the conversations too there. Not to say we shouldn't have it here. I just want everyone to know that, you know, we can do that too in person.
Yeah, absolutely. For ranchers where the production per acre is low, is there a scale of fees to help cover larger arid regions?
You mind if I take a stab at this, MJ?
Please,
Is that okay?
Yeah.
So essentially the amount of sites, it depends on, so every hub around the world, right? I mean, this is from New Zealand to New Mexico, California, et cetera. They're dealing with different ecoregions and different what we call stratas or different types of land bases on a property. So if you have a pretty homogeneous rangeland system, even if it was 10,000 acres, you're not putting a short-term site every 10 feet, right? There's a scalability of how you plan and create that monitoring plan, which the hub would partake in. And when you look at that monitoring plan, that's hopefully going to be addressing the variety and the size and the scale of your property itself. So, you know, monitoring in multiple ecosystems in North Carolina, where I used to monitor, I'm from South Carolina originally, and I would monitor it in North Carolina and South Carolina as well. You know, it's very different than what I look at when I'm in Colorado and we're talking about open rangeland, you know, in the shortgrass prairie. Those are two completely different monitoring plans. So getting in touch with your local hub and trying to understand what that monitoring plan would look like in terms of like scalability of fees, if you like, is probably going to be the most, it's the end of the day for me. So sorry, I'm just blanking on the word. I'd say appropriate way to answer that question.
Yeah. And maybe I'll just share too, as the hub, you know, we're helping implement these monitoring plans, but we also provide a lot of educational opportunities and peer-to-peer connections. So, you know, low production, right? Increasing your carrying capacity, increasing your production per acre, right? That's the benefit of, you know, focusing on these regenerative practices, is that some of the outcomes we're also seeing. Yeah, Sarah.
I feel like maybe you touched on this, but maybe I sort of missed it. So can you talk a little bit? I know that there are several folks on this call where like direct to consumer is sort of the primary market, and it may or may not be feasible to really leverage some of the like byproduct opportunities just based on where we're located. Can you talk about like, are there folks in Colorado or New Mexico, for example, who are leveraging this verification in that type of market context?
Do you want to talk about your local folks?
Yeah. So we have actually, I think there's 2 or 3 brands on your slide. Parker Pastures and Gleason Bison, local direct consumer producers who are Parker Pastures are not using that on their label, but they are sharing that they're verified. Gleason Bison is, and they're both, one is in Durango, one is in Gunnison, Colorado. We're pretty remote and removed from larger supply chains, but yeah, using, you know, pet food, getting some of their pet food, they're into this marketplace. So it's kind of cool because people are trying to figure out ways, and the support of land to market and a hub and a producer, there's a lot of opportunity to be really creative in leveraging that. So we do have a few brands in Gunnison, a few direct to consumer operations who are using this and finding it valuable so far.
And from a land to market perspective, so we aren't in the business of trying to, you know, take pennies from producers. It's not what we're doing. Most of our costs will be offset by the contracts we enter with larger brands who can sometimes actually cover the cost of these things if there's like a direct connection. Not always. There's so many different formats, and I don't want anyone to think that that's the only way that happens. But when we operate with smaller producers, we almost never, if ever, charge anything from a land and market perspective. Of course, it depends on what the business model is from that perspective. If you're a producer, but you're selling into international markets, like that's a different level of production than if someone who's finishing 10 to 15 head a year. So there's, from our perspective, right, we don't have control over the monitoring and the hub fee structure. But if there's a producer who is finishing animals and doing good work and wants to, put a label on something or see if there's access to a market that they might not have access to, and they're part of our member network, we're here to elevate farmers, not, reduce margins that are already reduced way enough. It's not what we're in the business to do. So, and again, I just want to make sure that it's super clear that it's not like there's no, I don't wish, because I like life being fun and having to figure things out, and it's not a black and white space. So to think that there's only one way to create these contracts or these agreements or these supply chains would just be a silly assumption to start with. But there is so much flexibility in how these supply chains, if you like, get built, and we want to make that into, ideally it doesn't have to be that way because it means that the supply chain is already existing. We don't have to build it all the time. But if there is, opportunity, that's what we're here to do. I mean, we want to find producers places where they can get value add products into their margin or their financial analysis of their own operation. And at the end of the day, producers are the one who supply these raw materials to the whole world. And that is, in my eyes, in my Wyatt Ball mind, that's an incredible public good that isn't recognized currently, just from like a goodwill perspective. So I don't know if any of that made sense. Sometimes I ramble, but
I think it did. It made sense to me.
I think you also talk about it in the chapter that you shared, Wyatt, but I'm wondering if you all can talk about, I'm just thinking about, like, Quivira is doing a lot of research right now related to soil health in New Mexico. If we wanted to have somebody be able to do this type of ecological verification for the producers that we're working with, I assume that there's a fair amount of overlap in some of the things that we are measuring. Can you talk about, like, from an advocate perspective, how we might be able to support producers that we're already working with in getting this verification, or how we work with you all in providing the data?
Yeah, I think I'd love to see some of the work you're doing. I think some of the, it's a pretty rigorous system, but I think there's ways to look at what's being done and how we can take some of that data, even if it's just short-term data, and then get some baseline. I think there's a lot of opportunity there to collaborate. But again, it's so context specific, so it's hard to be like, yeah, this will work.
I think that's more of a question for the global quality assurance team from the safety perspective. So, which I think would be a great question to ask, and a potential for something really beautiful. But
yeah,
so I kind of mentioned those layers of quality assurance, if you like. So you have the monitor who does the monitoring work. Then you have like the hub verifier who would be verifying the work that they do. They upload it to a platform. There's photos, there's photographic evidence. There's this whole verification process inside that ecoregion, if you like. And then there's the next step, which is the Savory Global QA team, which then essentially is made up of a bunch of master verifiers who are regenerative data wizards, if you like, who do that kind of final step of quality assurance. And I think it's actually in that chapter as well, if I remember correctly. Maybe at the bottom, it talks about quality assurance. And I think if we were to connect you to that team, kind of who heads up that whole global quality assurance, they would be able to provide you a much better answer than I would. And one thing I hate doing is I hate saying things with surety that I have no idea what the answer is. And so I definitely don't want to do that with you right now. But I do think that that would be the right direction to head in terms of finding out what that would look like, or if there's any overlap possibility. And I can help set that up. I mean, that's not a problem.
Yeah,
Or
we can
something
too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Kind of feel like I sound like Darth Vader. I hope I don't, but I feel like my voice is more gravelly than normal.
Yeah, and like we said, Lily and myself will be there as the Colorado Regenerative Network. Wyatt will be there with Land to Market, and there will also be some folks from Savory Institute, the Global Institute, exhibiting. So if you have specific questions, and we can help make some of those connections, just find us next week at the conference, and we're happy to dive deeper with you or anyone else.
And I would love to set the intention now. I wish I had like Sarah's intro slide about, conversations and, bring challenges and ideas. Like, please come prepared to pick apart everything that you want to. I mean, I love talking about this stuff, and, I hope to continually improve upon it. So I know Land to Market does and Savory does. So, come with questions. I look forward to trying to answer them the best I can and admitting to when I don't have an answer. So just want to set that now. Because I'm excited about this conference. I think it's going to be really cool.
Yeah.
I have one more question. And again, if you already said this and I missed it, I'm sorry. So once the baseline data is collected, sort of what is the timeline for verification process?
366 days. If there's a positive trend, the next short term, we can begin that verification. The full cycle, and MJ, if you want to hop in, just tell me to shut up. I don't mind. But from Land to Market perspective, like when we do that verification of the data, it's that, year 2, we get the data uploaded, we have that QA process, so probably like 380 days, right? Because it would take some time for the QA team to look at it. Doesn't sound as clean though. And then we would be able to verify. And then we want to be seeing that short-term data year on year. And then year 5, it's like a 5-year cycle. You have your second long-term monitoring process as well. So.
Yeah, that's right. We will do a baseline, set that up, and then we try to hit it 365 days after we set that baseline, right? So you're getting that same season, growing season data. We'll do a short term, upload that. And yeah, it takes a few days to upload it and then get that quality assurance, but it's a pretty quick turnaround, I would say, for a process like this.
And also for everybody on the call, all EOV questions, I mean, you can ask me some, but MJ will be your go-to point at the conference. I mean, that's what they excel in. That's their world. So I can answer it from like a Land to Market perspective, but MJ's the golden ticket there.
I actually have another question. I'm just going to keep going if that is okay. So
yeah.
At the beginning of our call, before anybody else was here, I was saying how there was a rancher from Missouri who called and had questions about regenerative verification. And I said, well, you guys should talk to the Savory folks. But one of the things that this rancher was talking about is how they had challenges around organic certification because of the fact that they're in the middle of a pretty industrial agricultural area. And I know that this is all sort of based on what the land is actually doing, but like, how do you think about or factor in if like a property is sort of being impacted by, spraying that's happened in spraying that's happening in an adjacent field?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we say this all the time, but it's like practice agnostic. And as long as we're continually see those trends of the land regenerating, you're verified, right? You're verifying that the ecological outcomes are moving forward. So it's hard, I know when all this was getting started, there was a lot of talks about like, well, what sort of inputs? And what we're really looking at is that long term, moving the practices, moving the land forward. And so, yeah, we can't, how can you the drift and all of that, we look at what's happening on that land, and that's how we verify. So hopefully that answers your question. And Wyatt, if you want to add.
Yeah, I'll just say I wish it could throw up a wall and say, that's it, don't spray, don't have any drift onto my property. But we're not going to be doing any sort of like testing to see how much chemical residue is drifted onto your property from glyphosate spraying or whatever it might be. Or, is there runoff happening for application on the upstream cropland that might be impacting your land from a water perspective. Mm-hmm. But what I think everyone in the holistic management world really believes in is building resilience. And if we start there, it's not like we're requiring 50% return on investment. That's kind of a tongue-in-cheek joke of year-on-year regeneration. Like, we just want to see trends. We just want to see positivity. And so if it takes time, it takes time, and we all know as well that land isn't this like I said, we switch the light and say, okay, tomorrow or today we're regenerative, and then next year all of a sudden the land regenerates. Like, we understand that it can be stock market, go up and down. There's context built into everything. And when this monitoring event, happens, ideally the monitors, when they're doing it, are taking notes. So this whole process, at least in my experience, when I would monitor, I'd have the operator or the land manager, land steward with us, and we'd be like, hey man, like, this field might look like, there's some nitrogen burn here. Like, did you put something down? And they're like, no, that was, and then you put that into the context, it goes into the platform, and there's context provided to a score. So the more information and the more engagement with the land manager in the monitoring process, usually, there's no hard fast rules, yields a more complete picture of what that monitoring process actually results. And so it's not a direct answer, because I don't know what the direct answer would be, but there is this like mentality to try to understand whatever is happening on that land base and believe in the philosophy that, life begets life, resilience brings resilience. And like, the more we can build in that mentality from a management perspective, perhaps we can be resilient to that spray drift. I mean, these are like super chemicals, so it's a little scary to say that, but we have to do our best.
Well, and it's reality. And I think Lily put it really well in the chat here, that ideally the practices and monitoring or shifting of practices that a producer is implementing can far outweigh any of those negative outside impacts. So and hopefully the data will reflect that. And like Wyatt said, engaging, we're not just like sneaking onto your property, taking a few pictures and leaving. Like, it's a process, and chatting with every producer, see what's going on. And it's not just like we get the data, like, it's producer owned data, right? So you get your data, we can work with you on what are we seeing, what are you seeing, where do you want to improve, and using that, it's not just data to go into a database and never be seen or used again. A lot of what we're looking at is to help improve your practices, your impact on the land, your regeneration of that land. And then land to market is just a nice little outlet for that, right? That's the ideal world.
I have one other hypothetical question that I would love to ask, which maybe is not a hypothetical question, but here in New Mexico, we had some very large fires this summer, and I'm curious, have you all worked with producers who have experienced sort of like cataclysmic climate events where, like, if they were to have their 5-year monitoring happen in the phase after the Hurricane Ian or the Calf Canyon Hermit's Peak fire here, that things would look pretty dire. How does that factor into the context, and have you worked with producers who are experiencing that?
Yeah, absolutely. What's cool about the verification process is there's a reference site within your region. So, if your neighbor, it might be your neighbor, it might not be, but if, we take into the account disturbance, we take into account climate, and what's happening there. So it's, you're not, like I said earlier, you're not being compared to, your ranch is not being compared to, someone far away. Like you're being referenced to other folks in your ecoregion, in your area. And that's, what we're seeing. So it's a useful tool in helping us say, yeah, you're regenerating your land, but there is a huge mudslide, right? Or whatever. So it's kind of built or baked into that verification process and quality assurance, right? Like
Yep.
You're the only producer who's in the area doing EOV or in your ecoregion, having those conversations, knowing what's going on. Like that's why it's within the hubs, because we know regionally what's happening, right? Drought, fire, whatever, act of God, right? And we can use that quality assurance to say like, oh, why did that go down? Oh yeah, there was a fire. Oh yeah, there was this. So it's kind of baked into that verification process.
What's also cool about that reference area on the flip side is, drought is the word of the century. And on the flip side, when you have reference areas that you're only seeing a minor decrease, if at all, during a drought, and you have producers in the same ecoregion saying, my score went down because the drought, and you're like, well, this reference area, they barely lost any forage matter, they barely lost any live canopy abundance, or we're seeing really abundant, living organisms in pastures. Like we can also see the resilience when these acts of God, a fire is a different story, but occur, these reference areas ideally are the highest performing producer in terms of a ecological index score in that region. And so it's also this like benchmark too, right, for everyone to look to and to base that monitoring process off in that region. So the reference areas are key. And I also just want to say, I did actually sneak back on a land base because they had purple love grass germinating in a pasture and I'd never seen it. And I was like, what is this? It's like candy grass. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It was in a pasture under holistic management. And I asked the land manager, I was like, dude, I got to go take a photo of that. Like, that's so cool. And my dog loved it. So just on that from MJ, I did go back on some.
You did sneak back.
Yeah, I got to go. I'm sorry. Love the questions there, Sarah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I've got one. I've just been finding lately I've been having to defend or define regenerative agriculture a lot. And people are just pretty skeptical. And I feel like truth these days is kind of a moving target. And it just seems like your work is like a really good thing to like be like, this is measurable. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if there's a particular resource that you recommend sharing.
For defining regenerative or what?
Or being like, this is something that is real. I feel like people are like, it may be, maybe not. Like, is there something that like maybe lays out like how you measure? Or...
Yeah, Wyatt just shared the landtomarket.com. They're sharing a lot of information there. Savory.global also has some of our EOE metrics there. But really, we're just trying to, we try to share the Colorado region, what's happening in our backyard and every hub around the world. I think there's 52 hubs around the world who are working specifically with their producers. So, metrics, what we're seeing will be different from, folks on the East Coast. But the hubs specifically are doing a great job of telling that story of why regeneration or ecological outcome verification, right? This verification process is showing the benefit of these practices.
Cool, thank you. Thanks for that link.
Yeah, I just shared that mainly because I actually over the weekend I talked to some high school students who, when I first started talking about regenerative ag, they were like, oh, this hippie dude. And, the UGG thing is great. I think it's amazing. But, from people who are usually skeptical of this, they're like, yeah, it could never exist in the real business world. Like, come on, what are you talking about? And I just think, this is a really recent success, of regenerative producers getting recognition in the marketplace with like a, with an UGG boot, which is maybe not the first thing people would think about when regenerative comes onto the scene. So And I like, I don't think I have a definition of regenerative down, but like for me, it's like, it's literally just, next year there's more than there was this year, whatever that might mean. And like life brings life. That's just like what I always say. It's like, it's just managing for more life. And whether that's the soil, whether that's animals, whether that's microorganisms, whatever it might be, like, let's just bring more life to this planet, because there used to be a lot more and there's not as much anymore. And that's indicative of where we're at as a society, as land managers, as, consumers, as supply chain partners, whatever it may be. Like, life is the true resilience. So that might be a little wishy-washy, but I kind of love that mentality. So no, we this is what I was talking about in terms of like a specific price premium mentality. The reason why we stay away from, it's not that these stats aren't important, but the reason why we kind of focus more into that like value add mentality is that premiums, it's just like why Land Market didn't call itself regenerative market verification, because when these premiums eventually become normal, right? Like 15 years ago, organic produce was 2-3 times as expensive. And now you have, anywhere between 40 to 60 cents difference. And if we only chase premiums in the short term, it could really damage the value, because you only associate it to a monetary price on a product. Whereas like if we approach value added revenue streams and resilience in supply chains, we can create long lasting impact. That's the hope. It's not to say that premiums aren't important. They're super important. But, we want to bring a holistic value to a producer that has storytelling, that has scientific backing, and that has economic profitability through new revenue streams, as well as increased price on a good. So if you're currently paying an $8 per hide disposal fee to a processor and you end up getting $12 per hide, I mean, that's not a price increase per pound on your carcass weight, but you've just reversed, essentially a loss on a carcass. So just an example, might not be the answer that was desired, but yeah, premiums eventually lose their own value in the marketplace, and we don't want to just chase them.
Yeah, a little paradigm shift of our market. Yeah.
But again, that's not to say that getting paid for your good work isn't important, and we do. We also don't get involved in pricing discussions between, if there was a brand buying your product, like that's your negotiation. That wouldn't be us. We don't own product. So
any other questions in the chat or unmuted?
awesome.
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah. Richard, did you have a question?
You know how sometimes I just can't resist jumping in. I don't have a question as much as an observation. Here on my own property, we had a string of drought years, and the only EOV data that I have is some of the short-term monitoring that's done, because I went through the EOV training. And so part of that was to submit my own short-term monitoring to demonstrate that I knew how to do it, and I could lay it out on my property in the right places and right amounts and all that. So I did that. But because of these dry years, I've seen some real serious loss of perennial grass. And when the data start to tell you that things are getting worse, at least some things are getting worse. And when I see my soil organic matter data starts to decline slightly, and I'm confident that the management is going quite well considering it's a drought. But it's back to your point about the reference areas and how the reference areas have to be appropriate to the land that you're managing. If you're using a reference area that's at a very high successional level, it's rich in different native or whatever kind of perennial species, different functional species are in their functional groups. That's one thing. But on my own land, it had been farmed to death by my family for 4 generations. And so it's difficult to think of it. It's difficult to think of a good reference area as being a fair comparison when I'm seeing biodiversity decline because of these especially dry years.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And while we do have these reference areas, that's why you have to have 1 full year, right, with 2 monitoring data sets to be verified, because we really just want to help you. The point of this really is to help you move through those functional groups and get to that higher succession. And if your place has been farmed to death and you're on year 1, like your baseline is gonna, we're not just looking at your baseline compared to the reference site, right? We're looking at your specific context and how it moves forward, taking into account drought and all these things. So even if the reference area is still higher succession but losing some biodiversity, that tells us regionally what we should be seeing and expecting from that year to year monitoring.
You bet.
And also from like a hub perspective, I mean, if you were struggling, we're not trying to create a program that punishes people, right? That's not like, it's not like, 1 year is bad and you're out, goodbye. See, you are the weakest link, goodbye. I mean, that's not, we can't talk about all this context and then ignore it when things get hard, right? So, the whole idea with hubs too is to be a technical support for you, so if you were going through something, if you were struggling, I mean, there's a whole network within the Savory world that is there to support, whether it's, more specific paid technical services, whether it's like holistic. I mean, you're an educator yourself, it sounds like, from a holistic management perspective, but the idea isn't to have you on an island surrounded by water with sharks swimming around it, right? Like that's not what we're trying to do. So it wouldn't be, if you were in the program from a verification and land and market perspective, it's not like, we get your data in the platform, we're sitting in some ivory tower and we see, oh, Richard's data declined by 5 points, click a button, you're gone, automatic email, see you later. That's not who we are, so there would be a more in-depth conversation about what is going on if that were to be needed from a data analysis perspective.
So the other point I want to make is that this land to market is new. This is different. This has never, ever been done before. And I'm so impressed with the progress that's been made to date, because you guys are doing the impossible. Nobody's ever figured out how to do anything like this. So I just want folks who may not be familiar with it to realize how special this whole land to market effort is, and the ecological outcome verification becomes a powerful tool for folks not only to better manage their own land, but for the people out there with money looking for something to buy.
Yep, I really appreciate that.
Go. And so I just want to congratulate all the difficult, impossible things you guys have been able to accomplish so far, and I look forward to the future. So thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
It's very kind of you. Appreciate it. There's many more impossible things to keep trying to do. So there's bumps ahead 100%, maybe even mountains, but we'll keep trying. And it's only possible because of the great work hubs do, producers do, monitors do. I mean, we're lucky just to be able to move in this space. It's an absolute privilege, and it's an honor to work with folks and try to progress this movement forward. And I mean, my goal as an individual is to try to help paradigm shift and mentality shift and bring regenerative, in a whole mentality. And it starts with how we treat our Mother Earth. I mean, that's how it starts. So appreciate the kind words, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah. It reminds me of something I learned from Alan Savory a while back, and he said, Richard, there are no experts. And I try to use that in my own workshops or field days, is to help people realize that the complexity each of us is asked to manage is so great that we don't even fully understand it. When we have more biodiversity in a shovel full of good soil than we have above ground in the entire Amazon forest, and we haven't even identified or figured out how those species in that shovel full of soil work, it's crazy what we don't know. It's humbling, and that makes it fun to be learning together. So
Yeah.
thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, that's all we have. Thanks for having us, Sarah and Lynn, and we're looking forward to seeing everybody at Regenerate next week.
Looks like there's one question that popped up in the chat. Yep.
Yeah. Yes, we are. And let's talk about it, because it sounds like you might have a few different questions and use cases from Land and Market. So come find me at the conference. Come find me at the exhibitor table, and we'll get into a deeper conversation about. But the short answer is yes, we are dealing with hides, bones, organs, fifth quarter, pet food, the whole kit and caboodle. Is that the expression? Man,
Yeah.
6 p.m. We don't own logistics, but we work with freight partners. We do. And usually where that, so just for a huge lever in this whole supply chain is those supply chain partners who can reach forward and backwards. So we do work with like abattoirs and slaughterhouses who would have all those logistics. I don't want to say figured out, but they have systems. And the biggest thing we see in terms of changing that is the idea of segregating and aggregating product that is meeting the Land and Market verification. Because the last thing we want is, trim coming from a feedlot getting ground up with trim coming from your property, and then you have two producers doing two different things getting recognized in the same way. So the segregation can be a challenge, but we have a supply chain team who that's their job, is to work on engaging with what we call key supply chain partners and trying to ensure full chain of custody on all raw materials running through the supply chain, and holding a high level of integrity for that whole process. But come find me, we'll talk. Looking forward to it.
Great.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, MJ.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Sarah.